Alright, another video. Hope y'all are doing good. Today we're going to be talking about utilitarianism. So what is utilitarianism? Utilitarianism often gets passed in liberal and conservative circles, especially classical liberals, which is actually what John Stuart Mill is. He's a classical liberal. A little bit of context as to exactly what utilitarianism is and what utilitarians believe, but also what type of ethical and moral theory it is. So the modern period of philosophy is typically associated around 15 or 1600s, right around Rene Descartes, who is seen as the father of modern philosophy. The famous "I think, therefore I am," his famous dualism approach in trying to convince others that there is a soul, and that knowledge is only attainable through the knowledge of God's existence, or that God does exist. Where utilitarianism fits into that is the development of a modern philosophical theory. So out of the birth of religious movements of divine command theory, which divine command theory has to do with, if God says that it is good, then it is good, it is just. And that was very integral in the Middle Age period, and of course in Greek and Roman and other types of cultures, and Judeo-Christian cultures, and Buddhistic and Hinduistic and Muslim cultures and stuff like that. So John Stuart Mill is trying to kind of mold these ideas of combining some ideas of Judeo-Christianity within utilitarianism. It also has a mathematical aspect to the actual series of thought itself. It's kind of like a point system. So yeah, let me explain exactly what utilitarianism is. Utilitarianism is the greatest conceivable good for the greatest number of individuals, the greatest happiness for as many people as possible. It is a it is a consequentialist moral theory. And consequentialist means that the consequence of the action is what makes the action just or unjust. Whereas the deontological arguments, like Kantianism, has to do with the intentionality of the action and the intrinsic good of the action, typically associated with like a goodwill. So if someone is a good person and their intention is good, then the action is always good, even if it might not seem necessarily good. And where you can see this within utilitarianism, of the greatest conceivable good for the greatest number of people, John Stuart Mill quotes even aspects of Jesus sacrificing himself on the cross, which he believes is a utilitarian argument, that the sacrifice of myself will ultimately be the hope and the redeemer of all people, right? Whereas it could also be the exact opposite. An example in media and in culture, pop culture references, is Thanos. So Thanos believes that the overpopulation of the entire world will ultimately lead to destruction and more problems later on than his seemingly immoral position that he will have at this current moment of extinguishing half of the population. But at least then it will solve the overpopulation problem. It will solve the need for wars and hunger and things like that. He is holding a utilitarian position, that this is going to be a net good for the greatest number of people, the people who do get to survive. Another example would be the great trolley problem. So the trolley problem is one person's on the left side of the track, there's 5 people on the right side of the track, right? And if you don't do anything with the track, if you just let the train do what it wants, then it will kill these 5 people. But if you move the track, if you take hold of the controls within the trolley and turn it to the left, it will intentionally kill one of the people. So is it better to leave the 5 people to die through your inaction, or is it more ethical for you to kill that one person but do it intentionally to actually commit the murder? Right. Obviously, at least in my opinion, you're choosing both options. But typically, with anti-utilitarians, why they believe that it is an unethical position is that the emotion or just the feeling of intentionally killing someone, of looking at them as merely what will result in the best conceivable good, they think is immoral in and of itself, since this system is kind of based purely on a point system, or kind of like an intuitive scoreboard of what would yield the best possible good and things like that. You can even look at it within modern day politics, or even with like early United States politics as well, and the judiciary system itself, where what punishment will equate the right harm done, eye for an eye kind of thing, is that needed? How much mercy or how much justice is needed? If a lot of these problems were caused by removing someone's autonomy and hurting someone's autonomy, then the utilitarian position would be that the then harm of that one individual would result in a greater happiness for other people, since it is highly likely, especially if he is, say, like a serial killer, that he will eventually do it again. So it's better for him to be in prison or to die of, lethal injection or something, or the death penalty, because it will save more people. This is a stupid example, but Batman is an anti-utilitarian, or can be seen as an anti-utilitarian in some rules. He's a Kantian, because in Kantianism's moral theory has to do with no killing virtually at any given time. You cannot kill an individual because you are hurting their autonomy. You are worsening their autonomy. You're removing them from the ability to act as a rational and moral agent. So Batman has that sort of like aspect of a moral law, of an absolutist law, whereas utilitarians, it might not be necessarily purely absolutist, but more of an objective opinion, especially with like act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism, which is a little bit different. Whereas rule utilitarianism kind of has, it's more of like a rigid set structure within act utilitarianism, where you're just kind of enacting what you believe would yield the highest good. But anyways, with Batman, the argument is that since with Joker, his moral code won't allow him to kill anyone, even Joker, and Joker we know will just escape and kill again and again and again and do horrible crimes in Gotham and beyond that. And since he will do that, a utilitarian would say Joker is causing more good, or is causing more harm, because Batman is not killing him and is not stopping him. His consequences of allowing Joker to live is destroying thousands and thousands, maybe millions of people's lives, and all because he has a moral conscience that he will not break, and yet because of his inaction, it is causing more harm than good. So that would be kind of an example. I would like to read some of the passages of Utilitarianism by John Stuart Mill. We are told that a utilitarian will be amped to make his own particular case and exceptional to moral rules, and when under temptation will see a utility in the breach of a rule greater than he will see in its observance. Where's the other one I wanted? The answer to the whole objection is that there has been ample time, namely the whole past duration of the human species. During all that time, mankind have been learning by experience the tendencies of actions, on which experience all the prudence as well as all the morality of life are dependent. He had to begin considering for the first time whether murder and theft are injurious to human happiness. Even then, I do not think that he would find the question very puzzling, but at all events, the matter is now done at his hand. It is truly a whimsical suspicion that if mankind were agreed in considering utility to be the test of morality, they would remain without any agreement as to what is useful, and would take no measures for having their notions on the subject taught to the young and informed by law and opinion. So essentially what that means is that utility, or the utility of like happiness, is supposed to be a selfless sort of example of what will allow for me to also be happy, what will allow for other people to be happy. And these things, it might not be, it's not just of a set of pleasures like hedonism, right? Or like modern day hedonism, like how many Twinkies can I eat before my stomach hurts, and as soon as my stomach hurts, then I am receiving more pain than I am of pleasure, and things like that. It's not more so a physical pleasure or stimulation that John Stuart Mill is really going for, but really of like unification of human beings and individuals within a just system, within contractarianism, of striving to also still be an individual, of being protected by law and order, of allowing for individuals to have their freedom of expression and to have their freedom of autonomy, but also be working together as maybe a nation or a community or something like that, in the hopes that everyone is having a prosperous and better life. So everyone has food, everyone has water, everyone has shelter. I look after my brother as he looks after me. Things like that, where the harm of an individual, you are also trying to help them as much as possible. Of course, then the argument is that simply by taking the bullet point of the greatest common good for the greatest number of people, if you could associate just with what you think is good with a group, then it can become disastrous, because utilitarianism has been utilized within different political structures and different political systems to be negative and very problematic. Even aspects of the Nazis or communist sort of regimes in the Soviet Union or Mao's China could be aspects of utilitarianism, of what they think that this high-end achievable goal that they are going to find is somehow going to bring about, happiness. That's even kind of aspects of historical materialism, is that eventually we're going to find the right set of values and the right set of moral beliefs, and we will rid away ourselves of class struggle and class structures in general, and just be brothers and sisters working to the greatest conceivable good for the greatest number of people. So that can be an aspect of a socialist or even nationalistic pride. But at least of how John Stuart Mill is talking about it, is to still maintain individuality and to maximize cohesiveness and order and structure within a given society. Of course, it does have its problems, and that is also the problem of combining it with Kantianism and utilitarianism, since Kantianism is very more rigid and rule-based and structured, whereas utilitarianism can be seen as maybe not as structured, or is a little bit more loosely bound and doesn't really have to do much so with intentionality, though intentionality does play a part, but not like the intentionality of Kantianism. So, like, if you allow for one thing to happen in one circumstance, then Kantianism would say that since you allowed it in one circumstance, it would then be allowed and permissible in all circumstances. Whereas with utilitarians, it is, will this consequence of this action ultimately result in a greater conceivable happiness for individuals, which is obviously difficult to accompany on a worldwide scale. But yeah, hopefully that made sense. I don't know if I really explained it very well, or exactly truly what utilitarianism is, but at least hopefully providing with examples, it makes a little bit more sense. Alright, have a good one. I'll try to post a little bit more frequently. Alright, have a good one.